Today's the day. It's the Zumbrota Area Historical Society's annual meeting. So we have a display set up and it's going to start any minute. I'll bring you inside. So check out this stove. This stove is your Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul Railway.
Right, that's 1903.
That's pretty cool stuff, huh? I didn't even know that was in this museum until I got here today.
2 o'clock.
That's so cool.
Midland or Milwaukee. Midland ran out of money right away, so the Milwaukee kind of spurred them on with the necessary finances. And the other one was the Chicago Northwestern, from Rochester to Zumbrota. The one on the left, the Milwaukee, was a narrow gauge. Consequently, their cars were small, they couldn't haul as much weight, etc., etc. So it really, from the time they arrived in Zumbrota, there was a lot of complaint. They were always asking the Railroad Commission to force them to go to a standard-sized rail gauge so they could haul more stuff, but it didn't happen until 1903. Anyway, it was called the crookedest railroad in the world. Supposedly, when they went around all these turns, they could almost reach over and touch 2-3 cars coming the other way. It was that crooked. The depots were in Mazeppa, Forest Mills, Millville, and Zumbrota. It was converted in 1902 to standard gauge. I think that might be 1903, but anywhere in that range. And it was extended to Faribault in 1903. So Kenyon and so on, Warmingo, Bombay, Kenyon, Faribault, and there's articles in the Zumbrota News about buying lots in the new town of Warmingo. Before that, Warmingo was, I guess, about a mile north. And here the Chicago Northwestern comes from Rochester, and Brenda thinks she knows what this is, but you know, you can see how they've cut through the hillside there to lay that track. Again, another look. Here's the depot right there. It looks washed out. Of course, it was green when it was moved out into the park. And that's, I knew that as the Redding house. Is that right, Gail? The Reddings live there? Okay. So right now, this would be about the parking lot behind the VFW. And here, if you're looking up Main Street from the covered bridge, the Chicago Northwestern Railroad Depot, right there. The Chicago Great Western, now that's where Casey's is right now. And that was torn down in 1966 by Burton Rader, and it was supposedly used for building some farm buildings. This one was torn down in 37 so they could get a Watten's oil station or gas station there, and that's where Berg's is right now. And then here's an article in 1966 about the news. In the article, they couldn't figure out, they weren't sure when this was built. Well, I found it in the newspaper in 1903. The carpenters were at work building this depot in 1903. And Thatcher's building was moved to Main Street. Okay. And the last I remember as a kid, this is 1970, and this would be like the very front of Casey's, right next to the sidewalk there. They had this little tin shed there, and right back there, that's the REA building, back there. And he was the last guy, and then pretty much ended. Now he was with the Milwaukee at that time.
Is it on? Can you hear me now? Okay. So my name is Anthony Bianchi. I live in Red Wing, Minnesota. And about 5 years ago, I got involved with N-scale railroading, and I thought that was it, man. I thought that was awesome until I started following the history. And once I found the history, the N-scale railroad is just kind of sitting there, and I haven't done much work on it since I started it. So this is what I do. You've seen the maps that Kevin showed you. I use a lot of those old pictures. I use a lot of old maps. And I go railroad hunting, and I find abandoned railroads, and I'm into that. And I think that is just kind of the best history, and it sure knocks the socks off of my N-scale railroad, that's for sure. So I started a YouTube channel. I call it Mr. B's Hiawathaland Rails. And that started going pretty good. So then I started a Facebook page, and now I show my videos on my YouTube channel and my Facebook page. I go to museums. In fact, yesterday I was at a train show, so I'll have that video up for people that like train shows that can't seem to get out and see one. And that's kind of what I do, just for an introduction. So what I cover is I cover what they call Hiawathaland, the Valley of Hiawatha. And this was actually a publication I found from the general manager and editor of the Red Wing Daily Republican Eagle. And he mentioned the 12 counties of Hiawathaland and how important they were to Minnesota. So I thought, I'm going to choose this area. So most of my focus is in this yellow area you see on the map, although I do go to other places. Okay, today's title is the Duluth Red Wing and Southern Railroad, October 27th, 1886 to June 21st, 1901. And this is actually the Stoneware Company, Pottery Mall in Red Wing. Has anybody been to the Pottery Mall? Does everybody know where that's at? So when we think about history, history is all about people. So when we talk about the railroad, we have to go back and we have to look, whose idea was the Duluth Red Wing and Southerns? Well, we don't really know that. But this is Silas Buck Foote. And he was living in Red Wing at the time, and he had the S.B. Foote Tanning Company. And he was also an inventor and had some other endeavors. And he organized the Red Wing and Iowa Railway in 1881. There's another fellow that was involved. These are actually board members of the railroad and officers from time to time. This is Lucius F. Hubbard. He's a pretty interesting fellow. He served with the 5th Minnesota Infantry as a private, and he rose to the rank of Brigadier General by 1864. He was elected governor of Minnesota on November 8th, 1881, and he served 2 terms. He was also a grain merchant, and he had a lot of contacts, you might say, when he was governor. So he was known to be a promoter of the railroad. This guy here, he's pretty interesting. I like this guy. This is Reverend William Rice. And I did find a picture of his wife, so I put his wife up there as well. He was born in Illinois in 1840, and he moved to Rochester, Minnesota when he was 16. He went to Hamlin University in Red Wing as a student in 1861 through 1863. He married Emma P. Eberman in 1863, and they lived for 42 years. So he married her while they were in school. We're going back to Reverend Rice now, and he was actually the agent for the railroad at that time, and had a lot to do with finding the property. In fact, it was said he bought property out there that he sold to the railroad for this depot. The town was called Rice, while the Duluth Red Wing and Southern owned the station. And the town of White Willow was located about a mile away. So it was bypassed, so it had to go back and forth to Rice with the mail in order to get it from the train or bring it to the train. So when it was sold, they rethought this whole idea, and the Chicago Great Western said that we're going to change the name to White Willow because there's another town in Minnesota that's called Rice, and it's causing confusion. So that's why they changed it to White Willow. Now this is a 1911 Ford, and you're probably trying to figure out what's this got to do with the railroad, and I don't even know who these people are. But there was a race from Zumbrota to White Willow. It seems that one fellow was heading to the train station, and he missed the train, and he looked at this other fellow that's got his car there, and he says, "Hey, can you get me to White Willow? I'm on my way to Red Wing. If you can get me to White Willow before the train gets there, I can catch the train in White Willow and proceed to Red Wing." So they hopped in this 1911 Ford, and I don't know what kind of roads were in Zumbrota back then going to White Willow, but they couldn't have been very good. I don't think there was any blacktop back then. Probably lucky if they were gravel. And the race was on to White Willow, and just as they pulled into White Willow, they could see the train pulling in. So yeah, a 1911 Ford can beat the train. Back in like 1911, so I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, so now we're getting into Zumbrota. So they're talking about the Zumbro River and they got to get across, so they have to work on something, they have to build something. So this is the first bridge they built. It's called a Howe Bridge. It's a Howe Truss Bridge. The man that designed this type of bridge, his last name was Howe, and that's how they came up with the Howe Bridge, the Howe Truss Bridge. So they built this bridge, and then a couple years later, they covered it. And this is the same bridge covered. And they covered these because when they covered them, it would protect the bridge and it would last longer when it's out in the elements. If they don't cover it, it's going to rot out pretty quick. So that's why they covered it. And this is known then as the second covered bridge in Zumbrota. That's a picture of the covered bridge. And I got that from your historical society. It's an awesome picture with the engine coming through. The photo, they say, is 1901, so that would be about the time it was being sold. One of the things you notice in pictures when you're trying to find out where things were is to look at the surroundings. And the first thing I see here is I see a switchman here. So I know that there's a spur somewhere out of sight here. There's a spur or something somewhere where the tracks are going to come apart. The tracks will come apart and the direction of the train can change as this man pulls the switch. So I had to figure out, well, where is this? And I figured out, well, I went to the park one day and I was walking on this far side of the park. And it just so happens that right here by this dam, you have a kiosk here. And that kiosk kind of showed the same map that you're seeing right here. And you can see where this creek is on the map. And you can see the railroad coming through. In fact, Kevin mentioned that we walked, there were actually 4 of us, I think, that day. And we were walking this section of the railroad out here. This is the section we were walking. And then it fades out and you can't see it on this curve. And when we see where the creek is, and we see where the old dam is, it's just a matter of trying to figure out how many feet from each to figure out where this crossed over. So the guy that we see sitting in front of the bridge at the switch would have been sitting right there. Now this one is the clay pits in Belchester. So right up here is where the depot would have been. And then it would run through this field. And this is the clay pits right in this area here. And I do have a video of this on my YouTube channel. I went out there and I walked that whole clay pit with the owner. It was just awesome. And this is the one that the Chicago Great Western built. And then in 1953 it was taken out. And this is one of the maps that Kevin was just using. This is a 1938 Harpo aerial map, or photo. Well, it's time to tear down. Hope you like this video. I'll catch you on my next one. Bless you all.